Good evening, Anchorage, Alaska. We are on the cusp of 2025, and to the lower 48 and to the rest of the world where it's already 2025. This is Bruce Lindquist with this podcast, Wonderful Counselor. If you've been with me, you know I'm a Christ follower and that there's only one wonderful counselor, and that is my Lord and Savior, Jesus. You also know I've been a counselor for 39 years, and I've been writing and recording these podcasts over the last few years to an international audience. Tonight, Wonderful Counselor Podcast continues to bring you Coffee House Theater with the mini-series called Hide and Seek. Episode 1 is titled, Does Love Have an Evil Twin Sister? Episode 2, Hide and Seek. Episode 3, Come Find Me. Episode 4, Demonize the Body Count. And tonight, Episode 5, Candy Meets the Serial Killer. Now, guys, you need to listen to these other podcast episodes to give you some context. It's like you're going to read the end of the book almost if you go to episode 5 first. So to savor this, to really follow this story and understand the characters and get all the nuances of the story, you need to start with Does Love Have an Evil Twin Sister? Now, before our story begins, it's time to dispel the myths about what serial killers are. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation. Hollywood has framed our beliefs about using our imaginations against us and giving us imagery of what a serial killer is. In this episode, I will introduce to you a clinical portrait of a serial killer. I'll forego the graphic and sexualized word imagery that sensationalizes and makes them notorious. Pure serial killers have no need for either. Now, I've studied various serial killers over the years in both literary forms, such as Dean Koontz' chilling portrayal of one of the most terrifying adrenaline-filled ride books, Intensity, to the most infamous that really live among us. They still do. They're still out there. My graduate school midterm was on the topic of psychopathy for my master's degree. For those interested in the subject of psychopathy, Richard D. Hare, PhD, is the utmost authority. I would recommend his book Without a Conscience, as he's interviewed many of the serial killers that you even know about. His PCLR, Psychopathy Checklist, Revised, is the gold standard for measuring psychopathy. It's used in worldwide clinical and forensic settings. John Edward Douglas, who I met, is the world's most famous profiler. He's the FBI agent portrayed as Jack Crawford in Thomas Hare's tour de force epic masterpiece, Silence of the Lambs. His book Journey into Darkness and Mindhunter will take you into the world of the profiler and into the mind of the serial killers. Now, normally I give a warning when a podcast episode is inappropriate for children, but this one may be too dark for some adults. It deals with adult themes and disturbing visual word pictures. The content may be too much for your mind. If you proceed with this episode, or you decide to study psychopathy, know I stopped after reading this quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. He who fights with monsters should see to it in that process he does not become a monster himself. I haven't returned to writing about psychopathy until now. Even for someone who walks in the light of Christ, the darkness is still with us. None of us can say what we would do in certain circumstances or not. The human being has the potential for great good and great evil. And Christians understand this. It's only through God's Holy Spirit that His light overcomes our darkness. It is New Year's Eve, just a few days after Christmas, in a sleepy town that looks like a Norman Rockwell painting framed with pristine snow, covered mountains, groomed trails for snow machining, with horses and carriages trotting down the street with the sound of sleigh bells. And then to put a bow on the package, in the center of the town is a white church from the early 1900s. Welcome to the city that lives up to its name, Serenity, Alaska. Candy is a blonde little girl at the tender age of 9, and her sister Bridget is 10, and they are staying with their Aunt Lucy and cousin Catherine over Christmas and New Year's holiday. Serenity is a far cry from the golden beaches of Cali, where the girls live, but they would rather be in Alaska. Candy stared out a partially frosted window and then breathed on the glass and wrote a question for Aunt Lucy and Catherine, which read, "Can Bridget and I go out into the woods? It's so beautiful out there," and added please for effect. The two women talked briefly with each other, and Catherine said yes, but there are conditions. You must stay on our 1-acre property. There are plenty of woods and places for you to explore, and you need to return in 2 hours before it gets too dark. Agreed, said both girls, hardly able to contain their excitement. So they got all bundled up and headed out into a winter wonderland. Candy was thinking to herself, "We'll be safe out here. The bears are asleep. The temperature isn't too cold." It started to snow again, and the girls, lost in wonder, tried to catch snowflakes with their tongues, giggling and wiggling their little noses when they missed, like little bunnies. They stomped their way through the snow and were about half the way in when they heard heavy breathing behind them. They heard the word track, and the girls stepped aside and watched a young woman jog past them. Candy thought to herself, "She is beautiful. I hope I'm as pretty as she is when I grow up." The girls watched her take the corner, and then she disappeared out of sight. "Come on, Bridget," said Candy. "Let's try to catch her." And as they rounded the corner, both girls froze as they watched a man come out of the woods and knock the woman to the ground. Candy didn't want to see, but it was like seeing an accident on the highway. They were like deer in the headlights. Candy watched in horror as the woman screamed and fought, but the man brought down the crimson-colored blade over and over again until the snow was blanketed with all her blood. Candy grabbed her sister and pulled her behind the snow-laden log, held her, and started praying. Bridget wasn't moving. She was frozen in terror. The man started walking in their direction, paused, looked around, and then right at the log. He then turned and walked on the trail, and they watched him until he was out of sight. Bridget could barely breathe, and then she formed the words in quivering voice, "Would he kill us?" And the question hung in the air, as the man's blood-soaked hand tore through the air and lifted Bridget by the hair, suspending her in midair. He looked at Candy and then Bridget and smiled. "Why, yes, I'm going to kill you," he said, as he put his blade to her throat. Candy looked at the man in a calm-as-death voice and said, "Put my sister down." The man mocked her and said, "I'm going to do to her is nothing like what I'm going to do to you. You'll first watch me gut her like some poor pitiful animal, and then you will beg me to kill you. But I will take my time as your prayers go unanswered, and I will torture you until your little body finally bleeds out its last drop of blood." Candy, in a death-gripped stare, looked in his eyes. She'd never seen such evil before, and then she spoke. "No, it is you who will die now." And the man began to draw the blade across Bridget's throat as blood spurted out as if cutting through an artery. But it wasn't from her neck. It was from his. As the bullet hit with such force, it spun him around and he went to the ground. Candy looked at the man and said, "Anyone who tries to hurt my sister, it would be better if he wasn't born." Candy watched the man die as his eyes faded out and lay in the snow in a pool of blood. A large woodman then appeared and walked up to the two girls. And Candy said, "I knew you would come." The man just stared at Candy. "Are you okay?" he asked. Candy said, "Much better than the woman over there or this man." "What's your name?" asked Candy. "It's Joe," said the woodsman, "and you are the bravest girl I've ever seen." Candy looked at the man and said, "I will receive your gift." The man stared in disbelief. You mean? Oh, no, I couldn't give that to you. It will be a blessing and a curse. Candy said, I know your daughter, who was my age, died, and you have been carrying the guilt of her death. Give me her necklace. It's not yours to carry anymore. I'll always wear it in honor of your daughter. Joe gave the necklace with a small golden box on it to Candy and started to walk the girls home. As the night descended, Candy felt a sharp pain in her leg, and Joe just faded away like he was never existed. Another sharp pain as Candy turned to her sister, and Bridget collapsed dead on the snow. The pain shot through her body like electricity, as if her leg was being sawed and severed, and then the darkness pulled her down. Candy waxed and waned in and out of consciousness. She could not feel her left leg. Her entire body was in shock. Her brain was hazy, as if under some type of drug-induced brain fog. She screamed, Bridget, without making a sound, as shame washed over her as she remembered standing over her sister's dead body in the morgue. Candy was so disoriented. She didn't know if she were now walking into a nightmare or would wake up at age 9 at Aunt Lucy's with hot chocolate. But that wasn't cocoa she smelled or tasted. It was blood, her blood, and it was leaving her body. Candy became more aware, but she couldn't tell if her eyes were open or closed. She was afraid to look too hard into the darkness, for fear of some crazed serial killer may still have a saw in his hand and cut her into pieces and feed her bones to his ravenous dogs. Candy felt the pain shoot through her neck, and the adrenaline started to pour through her, but her voice was useless. She couldn't make a sound. Her body was screaming, run, but she was suspended in midair. Her one foot was no use to her either. She looked ahead of her and saw an outline of a black shrouded body in front of her, hanging by a leather collar on a hook. Candy now knew she must be hanging on the hook. Time when you're waiting for your body to die seems endless, an eternity for Candy as she was just hanging there. Then a light came on, and she could see she wasn't alone, but there must be hundreds of women hanging here. The realization hit Candy like a freight train. I'm now like one of those dead women in the pictures, only not quite dead yet. Candy then heard the whirl of a motor, and like clothes in a dry cleaner, she was moving on a metal pulley system in jerks away from the other women to a small table with a glass of red wine sitting on it. Suspended next to the table, now at eyeglass level, Candy waited for what was to come, and her mind flashed back to her childhood nightmare, the hunter, having those terrible claws dig into her flesh. It really has found me. I'm going to die. And her imagination ran wild with horror. A man approached Candy, sat down at the table, and sipped his wine. He was about 70. He was well dressed and had a cane. He spoke with a pleasant tone and measured speech. He resembled Santa Claus without the suit. Perhaps you were expecting your nightmare demon, or the man who brutally killed the young jogger when you were 9, or whatever creature Hollywood has dreamed up to terrorize the masses. Candy couldn't answer. Something was pressing against her throat. The man walked over to Candy and adjusted the knobs on the collar. He sighed. It's all trial and error. You know the setting of 4 breaks the windpipe. Lost a few women earlier that way. You're experiencing a 3. You can breathe. Now I will set it as a 2. There. We are able to converse. As before you experience a slow and agonizing death, I imagine you have some questions. I will start things off. First, you are the first one I've allowed to talk. So let's have a civil conversation, shall we? I've been waiting for this moment much of my life. Candy was fighting to catch her breath, gasping for air. What did you do to my leg? The man asked. Why, I sawed it off. It was a hindrance for me, and I had another purpose for it. But don't worry. The nurse who helped me, she stabilized you. And you will live. For now. You can thank her. She's hanging right over there. But she won't be able to respond. And the other nurse? She's all wrapped up as a gift and sent out to an ardent admirer of mine. A Christmas present. How do you know so much about me? Said Candy. It's a good question. I'm glad you asked, said the man. And he pulled out a photo album, which is exactly like the one the FBI agent showed her. All the murdered and missing women. Have you noticed anything about them that's familiar, other than the marks on their neck and their collars and not having any blood in their bodies? Candy looked at the pictures and said no. He asked her to look again, this time. And Candy said, they all look strangely familiar. I know these women, she said. Of course you do, said the elderly man. I just don't remember when and where, said Candy. Well, let me help you with your memory, said the man. Let's watch some movies, shall we? Candy stared. That was my preschool teacher. How in the world did you get this video? She had forgotten all about her. And then another movie played, where her teacher was hanging in a tree, bleeding out with her wrist cut. The man said, she was teaching you to play nicely. I taught her how not only to play, but how to play dead. Another movie flashed on the screen. It was a young woman she had bought flowers from for her mom when she was in California. Another movie flashed, and she was covered in flowers hanging in her flower shop, watering her plants with the last drop of her blood. Another movie flashed. It was her Girl Scout assistant who helped her learn how to survive in the wilderness. And then flashed the movie. She was covered with merit badges hanging from a flagpole with the ground soaked with her blood. The man showed Candy these movies for hours, and hundreds of women died before her. I just don't understand, said Candy. How could you have these videos of all these women? They must be fake. They can't all be real. None of these women were found hung. Of course they're real. I killed them, said the man. And as far as not being found hanging, well, that's what dump sites are for. After I bled them out, I located the right place to throw away their bodies. Okay, said Candy, I believe you, but how did you get this video? The man commented, you saw them, and if they were 25, I bled them out to death. It was like I had the gun, but you were the scope, which helped me see my prey. I don't understand, Candy said. There's no way you could have followed me my whole life. Who are you anyway, the devil? The man smiled. No, just a man who's worked all his life on his craft. Some people build houses. I capture and torture to death by bleeding out young women. I was sloppy before, getting blood on the floor, breaking windpipes. But now it's like clockwork. I am a master at my craft. I don't say this in some vain or prideful way. I don't get off somehow emotionally killing women. It's just something I do. I think you'll particularly like this video. That's my sister's 25th birthday, said Candy. Yes, said the man. And you wrote out her death warrant simply by looking at her. All of those years promising to protect her, and instead you killed her. Candy said, I did not kill my sister. The man smiled. He showed Candy the video where he slowly bled out her sister. I made $1 million. She was quite a prize, said the man. Oh, and there's the video of me throwing your sister's body out of the trailer so it would hit your car. You're evil, said Candy, a monster. How many women have you killed? Well, first of all, I want you to use your inside voice. I don't like to be yelled at. But to answer your question, I started at age 10, when my dad taught me how to kill my 25-year-old sister. Hundreds, I suppose. Do you know why I haven't been caught? Because I'm rational. I don't rely on my emotions. This is how. They say, well, it's how I'm wired. You haven't explained to me how you followed me and used me to target those women. Why, you asked me to, dear. I told you the necklace was a blessing and a curse. Inside of it is a video camera. I followed you all your life. Candy felt violated in so many ways, like she had been naked before him. The man said, well, I could have seen your body in every way possible, and I was offered quite a bit of money to do so. But the market is filled with that, and I assure you I'm a gentleman. Not once did I watch you undress or have sex. I am a professional. I honored you. Candy couldn't believe what she was hearing. You call yourself a gentleman? Candy said in disgust. Why, yes. On the darkest web that only the wealthiest can afford, I'm known as a businessman, the gentleman of death, although no one's seen my face. Candy paused, her mind raced. You're Joe the Woodsman. Joe shared, yes. And I knew our paths would converge eventually. All it took was to add your sister to my collection of works, and here you are. She will live forever on the dark web. Why me, said Candy. Why me? Because it was destined, said Joe. I've traced back our family craft since the 1920s. It's in our genetic heritage. Our family business. I suppose now I have it a lot easier than those who came before me with all this technology. Candy, you don't know. What you don't know is that I didn't shoot the man who was going to kill you both to save you or your sister. I killed my son because he failed at the craft. You just happened to be there. He was your son? Candy said, and then went silent, remembering that horrible event. Yes, said Joe, but he was too emotional. I tried to beat it out of him, to save his life, but in the end, I had to put a bullet through him. Candy was afraid to ask the next question. This is your business? Of course. I play on the darkest web, where people who can afford it bet on how long the women will last before they die. People all over the world play. I've amassed quite a fortune. Let me show you how this works. And the machine once again made a whirling sound, and Candy's body jerked in the air in front of the monitors that lined the wall. All over the world, people bet if women will die of starvation, dehydration, or from a complete loss of blood. They also bet on the time of death. Joe shared, I'll show you. And the machine jerked and pulled another woman in front. A crowd of faces then filled the monitors. They all like to watch, said Joe. Let me show you what they're seeing. They have the ability to magnify the picture and get as close to the woman as they want. Candy looked in horror. She'd never seen a person die slowly. She prayed for the woman to die. It was unbearable to watch. The woman finally bled out, and Joe shared, Monte Carlo. We have a winner. $500,000 will be deposited in your bank account. The woman on the other end was extremely happy she won. Of course, that meant everyone else lost, and $500,000 was nothing compared to how much Joe made. Joe shared, That's enough for tonight. You will have 10 women in front of you to watch die, and then it will be your turn tomorrow. Unfortunately, my dear, you will not live to see the new year. Joe looked at Candy. And your death? will break the video. It will go viral. I can retire. It'll break the bank, having created my death masterpiece. Candy stared. I have a question for you. Of course, said Joe. I welcome your curiosity, and all the questions I will answer before you die. What am I missing, said Candy. Joe shared. As long as time itself, no one knows when or who gave it to our family. Call it a prediction or a prophecy. It would be like there's a saying, a girl came from the sun who would walk into our darkness and then bring death and darkness to its knees. I believe that woman is you. I was sure of it when you stared down my son to protect your sister. So tomorrow night, you will either experience a slow, torturous death, or you will kill me. Just as you said, anyone who hurts my sister, it would be better off if they were not born. Well, I just didn't hurt her. I terrorized her to death. Come get me. With that, Joe turned on the motor, tightened Candy's collar, and she returned to the line hanging with the other women, waiting to die. Joe walked out of the room, got into his car, and drove home to his family, as dinner would be on the table. He was always hungry after a hard day at work. He also had a birthday party to attend. His daughter is turning 25. Join me next time for episode 6 and find out if Candy dies or the prophecy is fulfilled, and Joe dies and his reign of torture ends. The monitors are about to turn on. Don't leave Candy hanging.